Okay, here we are. We're back. The world is still at war, so we can still talk about this. My wife and I have a conversation once in a while. Not so much these days as we used to because we've kind of accepted reality. The conversation goes something like this. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. Burning fossil fuels is enhancing the greenhouse effect. The enhancements to the greenhouse effect are warming the planet beyond what we're accustomed to. This is called global heating. Well, global warming, if you rather, but I think it's more like global heating now. We're discussing heat waves, so let's call it what it is. Global heating. And we need to stop burning fossil fuels. You'll have other people say, there's other ways to mitigate the problem. We can remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. We can promote forest growth. We can do other things. Okay, I'm an engineer and I'm a biologist, so I can address all the mitigations that people are throwing out there as theoretical solutions, and I can tell you right up front, none of them are going to work. There is no mitigating this. There's no way to save ourselves from this. You're not going to mitigate using pumps to pump the seawater out from your communities. You're not going to put up seawalls. We're going to have to adapt. And adaptation is going to involve moving ourselves inland, getting away from the sea, getting away from the heat, changing how we house ourselves, how we organize our societies, where we get our food, where we get our energy. There's a lot of adaptation we're going to have to get into. And the conversation my wife and I have is, I don't know how we're going to get off of fossil fuels, but we must. We will either do it voluntarily or it will be done to us. But I can tell you, the day after we have stopped burning fossil fuels, essentially, this is somewhat theoretical, right? The day after, the world will change. And what you'll see in the world is there'll be no driving. There'll be no flying. There will be no movement, shipping of goods. There will be no movement of money, banking and finances. And there'll be no jobs. And of course, that's the reason why politicians and economists and all the other leaders, so-called leaders, don't want to stop burning fossil fuels, because they know what I know. And anybody who's looked at this for more than 15 seconds will tell you, oh, yeah, you have to stop burning fossil fuels? Well, if we do that, for whatever reason, then we'll have no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. So there you go. And that's the end of civilization as we know it. That's the end of civilization as we've known it for about, 200 years? Maybe, about 200 years. People used to live differently. They used to live without fossil fuels. If they wanted some kind of fuel, they burned wood or wax or oil or something else. All of which, comes from basically the plant kingdom. The plant kingdom is a natural solar collector, makes wood and oils, plant oils, right? Seed oils. So you can have things in the absence of fossil fuels, but you can't have driving and flying and movement of goods and movement of money and jobs. So all that goes away. And you think, well, there may be some ways we can keep those things. No, you can't keep those things. If you stop and think about it and you're clear-minded about it, you can't have those things. Now, so we know what's going to happen the day after we stop burning fossil fuels. One thing that does not happen, sadly, is we don't stop global heating. But that doesn't matter. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. And you're not going to have an immediate end to global heating. That still continues. Oh, it continues to get worse. Oh, and it really never goes away. It could take 100,000 years for the current situation to naturally go away. 100,000 years is not out of the question. But on day one, you will get no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. Basically, industrialized civilization collapses and evaporates. I don't know how we stop burning fossil fuels, because given the outcomes, no one will volunteer to do that. And they haven't been. We've known about this problem for 70 years. We've been talking about this problem quite actively for 30 years. And no one's going to stop burning fossil fuels. They're just not. Except we will. We might stop burning fossil fuels because global heating just makes it impossible to engage in those kinds of activities, mining fossil fuels. Maybe you can't have coal mines. Maybe you can't have natural gas extraction. Maybe you can't have oil fields, and maybe you can't have tankers and pipelines because it's just too hot. The equipment can't run, or the people who maintain the equipment can't go out and do the maintenance, or the people who would be drilling the wells or mining the coal or transporting the fuels around the country in trucks and cargo ships, they can't do that work anymore, so you can't have them. So we could just wait for nature itself to just get too hot, and then we can't have those things, and then they stop. And then there's no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. Or we can go to war. And the interesting thing about going to war is the reasons to go to war have nothing to do with driving, flying, goods, money, and jobs. Those things are expected to be outside of war. We do war for other reasons. One of the consequences of waging war the way we're doing it today, right now, as of what, Saturday? One of the consequences of waging war in the Middle East, or in Ukraine, it turns out, that was interesting, right? Is that we begin to interfere with our ability to get to fossil fuels. One example, Russia invaded Ukraine. They thought that was going to last 3 days, maybe 10. The Ukrainians fought back. The Ukrainians are now fighting back, creatively enough, by bombing Russia's oil infrastructure, primarily their ability to transport oil in pipelines, refine oil so you get fuel products, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, move oil by cargo ships, not cargo ships, oil tankers, right? The so-called shadow fleet. So Ukraine has been degrading Russia's ability to move oil around, and they have a lot of oil. They also have a lot of natural gas, but their natural gas pipelines are being degraded as well. So the Russian oil giant has basically been somewhat taken out of the market. And, that was fine, though, because the Middle East could still export oil. Iran was under sanctions, but they could still sell a lot of oil. And they sold a lot of oil to China because, China doesn't care about sanctions. Venezuela, they were exporting oil, but their oil is not that easy to refine. And so they could really only export it to the U.S. And then there was a kerfuffle over socialism in Venezuela, and that all got shut down. Then they came back online, but Donald Trump is managing their oil, so we don't know who's going to get the oil. So Venezuela is kind of offline now. Russia, oil exports are plummeting. Venezuela is offline. Who else can I point to easily before I get to the big kahuna here? And then the Middle East. There's several nations in the Middle East that we would call oil exporters. They're moving some combination of either or crude oil via oil tankers and pipelines, or natural gas via pipelines and also liquefied natural gas. So these are different types of tankers. They transport liquefied natural gas. So that's a lot of energy coming out of the Middle East. And the fear has been for decades now that there was going to be some sort of a big blow up in the Middle East that would take that oil resource offline, either temporarily or permanently. Maybe less so permanently, but even temporarily is not a good thing. My book, my book, titled It Was 100 Days, An End of Civilization novel, available on Amazon, link in the description. This is the cover. These are what's called pump jacks, and this is AI generated cover. But this is an oil field. It's a fairly common sight in oil fields. And my book begins on day 0 of 100 days. So day 0 is like the preface. On day 0, it begins with a interruption in crude oil exports from Iran and Saudi Arabia because they get into a war with each other. I don't even specify why the war starts. And it doesn't matter, does it? Whatever. Someone looked at each other. They looked at each other funny. They insulted each other's ancestors. Who knows? But they start a war. And so in the book, they go to war. And they actually use nuclear weapons. Iran has been trying to get a nuclear weapon. We have to assume they have one. Or several, maybe. Saudi Arabia is an ally with the U.S. and to some extent Israel. The U.S. and Israel both have nuclear weapons, so we have no business assuming that Saudi Arabia doesn't have nuclear weapons. And so in the book, as a result of just some easy assumptions, the Iranians nuke the Saudi oil terminal on their coast and take it offline basically forever, permanently. And the Saudis, or one of their allies, in the book it's not specified, because probably in reality it wouldn't even be known, nuke the Iranian oil terminal on Karg Island and immediately take Iran and Saudi Arabia offline for oil exports. This is the book. Now, of course, here we are, March 2nd, 2026, and lo and behold, what's happening? Iran has been bombed by some coalition of U.S. and Israeli forces, at least. And then they turned around and launched their missiles into surrounding nations in the Gulf. This isn't fiction now, right? This is headlines today, March 2nd. Has been for a few days now. They launched their ballistic missiles into the capital cities of the regional countries, right? I think 8 countries in the Gulf have now been hit by Iranian missiles. So we're escalating now, right? Did any of this activity, either from the U.S. and Israel or Iran or the Saudi Arabians or anybody else, did any of this take the oil exporting infrastructure offline? And the answer is, I don't think so. Because now you're talking business. I mean, it's one thing to want to bomb each other's and kill each other's leaders. That's politics, right? But if you start knocking out oil terminals and blowing up pipelines, well, now you're talking business. Hold on. Let's not let pleasure interfere with business, right? So have they attacked the oil infrastructure? I don't think so. Maybe not in a big way. But who knows? That could be next. Iran sells most of its oil to China. China is I don't want to say they're unfriendly nation. Donald Trump loves Xi Jinping because Donald Trump would like to be an autocrat, just like Xi Jinping is. So, Donald Trump might never take the Iranian oil infrastructure offline because that would be a finger poke to the eye of China. And he would like to be on good terms with China, or whatever else he says. But what if that happens anyway? What if the Israelis do it? What if the U.S. does it on accident? What if the U.S. does it because Iran won't bend the knee? Because they're not going to bend the knee, of course. They're not going to bend the knee, even though their theocratic leader, Khamenei, apparently has been offed. There's 10 in line to replace him, right? So they don't have to bend the knee. They just have to regroup, reconsolidate, and launch more missiles. So at some point, might the U.S. destroy the oil facilities in Iran? And if they do that, might Iran destroy the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia in retaliation? Yeah, maybe. Is that what everyone's worried about right now? Yeah. The price of oil is already going up. The price of gasoline is already going up. I don't know why. I mean, it's going to be 60 or 100 days before the price of gasoline actually ought to go up. Because you have to refine oil to make gasoline. That takes time. You have to transport it. That takes time. But anyway, they can raise the price of gas, so they will. Everyone's nervous now about the price of oil and the price of gas, and of course availability, because look what else is happening. Russia is offline. Ukraine, the pipelines that go through Ukraine are basically down. Venezuela is offline for all practical purposes. And now Iran is potentially offline. They've blocked the Straits of Hormuz, so that takes them offline, plus all the other nations in the Persian Gulf. So Now we're at war. And the premise in the Middle East, in the oil patch, and the premise of my book was, it's not even that important of a premise. It's just like, well, this happens. And the oil infrastructure gets taken down. And then everyone panics. The nations that are reliant on crude oil imports, like the UK, France, Germany, China, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, so on. It's a long list, right, of developed and industrialized nations that are reliant on crude oil imports. Okay, that's a lot to string together, but that's what we're talking about. The U.S. has its own crude oil resources. Well, they don't really belong to the U.S. They belong to the oil majors, but the oil majors, while they do currently sell those into the open market, the oil majors could be made to not do that. They could be made during a military emergency to sell oil resources from the U.S. only to the U.S. government for use by the military and maybe possibly by the U.S. citizenry and U.S. businesses and U.S. exporters and some others. So all that can be turned around. Even though the oil majors can do what they want with the oil and sell it to the UK and sell it to the Russians and sell it to whoever else, Chinese, stroke of a pen, Donald Trump could change that. So the idea in the book is that there's enough of an interruption to the crude oil supplies coming out of the Middle East because of a dust-up in the Middle East that civilization panics. Everyone contracts their local economy to try and save their own resources, and global industrialized civilization collapses. And this happens over a month, or a few weeks. And that kicks off day one. Day zero, which is all this churn, all this uncertainty, all this panic, all this bombing, and all these terrible things happen. That's day zero, kicks off day one, which is the beginning of the novel. So here we are. And that's the problem with speculative fiction, right? I've written this book, Speculative Fiction. It was 100 days. It's like 260 pages or so, right? It's a journal. It's got basically 100 chapters. And I wrote this novel, and it was speculative fiction, and I really wanted to get it out because I knew that speculative fiction has a annoying habit of becoming reality. My book, It Was 100 Days, is rapidly becoming a documentary. So there you go. And I'm promoting the book in part because I kind of knew it was going to become a documentary. So I wanted to write a book that would kind of prepare people for the system we're in right now, on March 2nd, where we're staring at the end of the fossil fuel age. And what this video is kind of about is that, okay, so now maybe we've answered the question. How do we get off of fossil fuels? Here we are. Maybe we're just about to do that. Maybe there'll be enough upset and sturm and drang and fire and fury in the Middle East. Russia's already offline. Venezuela's offline. Iran is essentially offline. Saudi Arabia could go offline. The Straits of Hormuz are closed. The Suez Channel can be closed. What happens if all this happens and all of a sudden we can't transport oil? Well, then we get day one. All right. Now, what's interesting about the book and what's interesting about day one, well, and really day zero, is this answers the question. How do we get off of fossil fuels? Now, the book is about, okay, now we're off of fossil fuels. Now what, right? It doesn't take 100 days to get off of fossil fuels. It takes 2 weeks to get off of fossil fuels, meaning they stop moving. And then it's 100 days of, oh no, what now? It's 100 days of, without fossil fuels, we don't have modern civilization. And the people in the story realize real quickly, if you don't have fossil fuels to run your entire life, which is like your entire life, 100% of everything you do, 100% of the time, if you don't have fossil fuels for everything you do, then certainly you don't have driving, flying, movement of goods, movement of money, and jobs. Those go away right away. And that would be bad enough. But then you also don't have delivery of food to the supermarket, to the store, because that's a truck. And the truck has to drive hundreds of miles on diesel fuel. And if there's been a massive interruption to crude oil supplies, then maybe the governments of the world start to sequester the fuel resources for their militaries. Oh, and of course for their elites, right? The government employees still have their limousines. The president, the vice president, the prime minister, the emperor, whoever else, still has their private militias, their private transportation, their castle, their hidey hole. They have all their things, so they get theirs. We don't get ours because there's a choke. There's a chokehold on the movement of oil. So not only do we not have driving and flying and all that, we also don't have delivery of food to the supermarket for me and you. I mean, the president gets his. He can get anything he wants. The emperor gets his. He gets anything he wants. But the rest of us are going to find out that the service stations have no fuel. And that happens fairly quickly. And then, because a lot of our electricity is generated... Oh, by the way, 80% of our economy, 80% of what happens in a developed world, it happens with fossil fuels. The electrical part of our energy mix is about 20%. Now, some of that might be solar, and some of that might be wind, and so it's somewhat immune. I'll put that in quotes, because it's not immune. There's maintenance issues and everything else. Some of that is somewhat immune to interruptions in the oil supply. But a lot of our electricity comes from burning natural gas and burning coal and even crude oil. In Cuba, they burn crude oil out of the ground to generate electricity. I can't imagine how filthy that industry must be, but that's what they do. They got crude oil for free from Russia for like 2 generations of Cubans, and they just burned it in their power plants. Just right off the boat, pump it into the power plant, set it on fire, and generate electricity. Then Cuba was getting their crude oil from Venezuela, and now they're not. And they're having a huge implosion. They get to go first. They get to be the group of people who first figure out how your life evolves or devolves, as the case may be, without constant inputs of crude oil. 20% of our energy mix is electricity. I've got solar panels, and I've got a battery, and I've got some other things. So for me, electricity is mostly okay, but I'm 1 in 1,000. I'm like 1 in maybe 20,000 people households that bothered spending the money on that. So for most people, not only are they not going to have driving and flying and moving goods, which is all crude oil, get gasoline and diesel, they may not have much electricity either. So without electricity, or without reliable electricity, all of a sudden you're not refrigerating food, you don't have lighting inside the store, you don't have cash registers, right? You don't have credit card swipes, you don't have a financial system, you don't have the internet. Without reliable electricity, all these things collapse. Without reliable fuel at the service station for you to just pull up and fill your tank, then you find that you can't drive. You find that deliveries slow down. FedEx, UPS, plus all the shipping companies that can't move goods on land because they can't find fuel for their trucks. Now, this is kind of a worst case scenario. There's crude oil in tanks. The U.S. has something they call the SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's where the U.S. government buys crude oil. Again, even though the U.S. produces its own oil, it doesn't. That oil belongs to the oil majors, Chevron, Exxon, all the rest. So but the U.S. government can buy it back from them, and then they poke it away in their SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and there's a lot of oil in there. Some of it is in tanks above ground, but some of it's also below ground in ice caves. And it's meant to be used in wartime for the military, so they can have all the fuels they need, right? They have jets and ships that need bunker oil and everything else. They wouldn't share that with you and I. So in the case of a major interruption in the crude oil supply, which is always basically JIT, just in time, They don't pump more than they need to. They don't store more than they need to. Storing crude oil is expensive, and it's a waste of money, really, on some level. So it goes from the oil field to the tanker to the refinery, and it gets refined into fuel products, and all of that is JIT, just in time. Because storing it, you're losing money. So all this JIT economy, everything in flight, everything churning, all the gears turning all the time for all the things, comes to a halt with any substantial interruption to the flow of materials, mostly crude oil. Crude oil is the king. So what happens? Well, in my book, there's no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, and no jobs. And people have to figure it out after that, right? It takes 100 days, hence the title of the book. And the book actually is, I have to say, it's optimistic. They figure it out. Imagine that. They figure it out. In reality, are people going to figure it out? Sure, some will. Some will. And we're just about to find out, folks, because here we are. Here we are. We're just about to find out. This is one way that we stop burning fossil fuels. I just happen to have worked that into the book. There are other ways that we stop burning fossil fuels. But as soon as we do that, like within 2 weeks of doing that, I like to say the next day, but really it's maybe 2 weeks, what you will see on the ground, day zero, will be no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, food, right? Finished goods, no movement of money, no financial system, and no jobs. And kind of in that order. The first group to be affected will be people who go to the service station to buy gas for their car. If oil supplies have become interrupted in nations that don't have their own oil supply, then the first thing that's going to happen is those fuels will be pulled off the market and set aside for the use of government, the elites, and the military. So the first group of people who are going to be impacted by a significant interruption in crude oil supplies will be drivers. Shortly after that, the airline industry. Now, being an industry, they have more pull. But shortly, people are going to recognize a lot of these people flying around in these airplanes are doing this for pleasure, 50% or more. So, going to visit family or going to go on vacation or whatever they're doing. So let's just bring down the airline industry. They can do that. They've done that before. They do that when they have to do that. So no driving, no flying. Moving goods is a little more hairy because goods are things like finished products, medicines, food supplies, processed foods. Oh my God, we're getting into the meat and potatoes, literally and figuratively. Okay. Sometime after that, then the financial system implodes. So you're not moving money anymore. Oh, and people are, get bank failures. Run on the bank, right? People are panicking. Everybody's scared. Everybody wants their money. Run on the bank. The banking services collapse, and maybe even the governments start to regulate movement of money. You can't have any. We want all the money. We're shutting down the banking system. And if they want people to stay home, and they don't want people to storm the Capitol, and they don't want people to riot and engage in insurrection, then, eventually they just deprive you of money. You just can't get money out of the bank. And then finally, there's no jobs. So after there's no driving, no flying, no movement of goods, businesses start to fail quickly because the entire economy is JIT. So very quickly, businesses start to fail. And then you have no movement of money, there's bankruptcies everywhere, and then suddenly no one has a job to go to, and you're finished, and that's day one. Maybe day 14, 2 weeks into it. That's your scenario. We go very quickly from day 1 to day 14, and it's over. Now, the book actually describes 100 days. Yeah, I think that's a legitimate goal, is to survive 100 days after the fall of global industrialized civilization because of an interruption in the availability of crude oil. I think you got 100 days to figure it out. That's how I wrote the book. Now, this sounds terrible. And that terrible scenario is why global leaders, industrialists, elites, economists never wanted to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. That's a fact. And even though that leads to massive hardship and probably mass fatality events, no food, eventually no water, no electricity, no medicines, and of course no jobs for most people, they can't even imagine surviving, just being alive without a job. All the same, even with all that hanging over our heads, even with all that being likely, even with all of that being unavoidable, still, we have to stop burning fossil fuels, because you're also not going to enjoy living on a planet that's uninhabitable because of heat, which is what's going to happen. And it doesn't have to happen over the entire planet. If it just happens in major parts of the the continents, North America, South America, Eurasia, Africa, right? It's just a couple of big targets. Even if large parts of those 4 continents become uninhabitable, we're done. We're done. We're not coming back. If large parts of those continents, even 25% by land mass of those continents becomes uninhabitable, we're finished. Which you could do very quickly. Heat can do that almost instantly. We can have a month-long heat wave in the northern hemisphere, a month long, mass fatality event, 100 million people dead, which is pretty small beers in terms of the global population of 8,000 million. 100 million is, barely registers. It's like 1.2% or something, right? But still, 100 million dead in on 4 continents, much of which is the developed world. At least half of which is the developed world. 100 million people dead in a mass fatality event is the end of our world. It's the end of our world, even though it's like a little over 1% of the population. It's enough. And then pretty soon, the world is uninhabitable just because of the refugee crises and the political upheaval and everything else. But it would end global heating. If we were to give up on fossil fuels, however we did that, including too much heat, that would put an end to our current mechanism for enhancing the greenhouse effect. So could war save us from uninhabitable Earth? And that's a good question. I don't think us'uns, we'uns, you, me, those people, that guy over there, and least of all our leaders, so-called leaders, right? I don't think we can make that decision for ourselves. We're not capable of making that decision. That much has proven beyond shadow of a doubt. It's absolutely been demonstrated that we cannot make that decision. We've had 70 years to make that decision, the last 30 of which has been we've been going at it since about the year 1995. Really been going at it, and we still haven't been able to make that decision. In fact, the decision-making process of what to do with our fossil fuel consumption has become a joke. Just a joke. It's been completely overtaken by the energy companies and the energy exporting nations like Saudi Arabia and the U.S., and the ability to make a decision in these topics is just a joke. It's a clown act. We can't do it. But maybe war could. Well, there you go. That's something. We got that going for us, right? We're really good at waging war. Hey, we just sparked off a big war in the Middle East. Wow. That sounds kind of dumb. For all those people addicted to crude oil, which is like everybody, why would you spark off a war in the Middle East? That's kind of dumb. Okay, but they did it anyway. And so now we're going to find out, right? But one conspiracy, if you happen to like conspiracies, you want something to argue about down at the pub, one conspiracy would be that the elites know that we can't get 8,000 million humans off of crude oil, because that would be a catastrophe. So they could instigate a way to do that where it's like nobody's fault. And then if most of 8,000 million people die of some combination of no water, no food, no medical care, no electricity, no lighting, no transportation, then whose fault is that? Oh no, we had a war in the Middle East. That's terrible. Oh no, now look at all these people. They can't eat, and there's no water being delivered, and there's no heating and cooling, and there's no food being delivered, and oh no, it is just a terrible thing. But they could instigate a war and then sort of walk away from the rest of us. Kind of a let them eat cake moment, right? You people are hungry, you have no water, you have no shelter, you have no electricity, no medications, you're dying in the streets, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's all the things, and you haven't got a job, you have no money, and the global economy has collapsed because some of us decided to wage a war in the Middle East. Oh, woe is me. Well, sink or swim. That's what they could say, knowing that most of us are going to sink. I mean, if you wanted to be conspiratorial about it, and you're scratching your head wondering, why are they bombing Iran when supposedly the last time they bombed Iran, they got rid of Iran's nuclear capabilities? And why are they doing it now? Is there a good reason for doing this? What, to save the Iranian people? Well, that's not going to happen. So why are they doing this? Well, one conspiracy would be they want to end the consumption of fossil fuels. Because the elites don't want to. I mean, they're going to inherit the earth. This whole biblical thing of the meek shall inherit the earth, yeah, well, that's just a fairy tale for adults. The meek do not inherit anything, okay? The elites inherit the earth. And what is that? 8 million people? That's what I keep saying. That's like 1 in 1,000 of the current population. 1 in 1,000? Yeah, that's about the number. 8 million elites. These are the millionaires, the billionaires, actually probably mostly billionaires at this point. Must be 1 million people. 8 million people that constitute the upper echelon, the 1/10 of 1% of the global population, who currently run everything and decide where the wars are going to be. So, who knows why they bombed Iran? Maybe they've decided that as the world is clearly getting hotter, we're having marine heat waves all over the planet, folks. And I just saw another video this morning, Jennifer Francis talking once again how this summer when the El Nino hits, and it's going to be a knee slapper El Nino, when that one shows up, we're going to cook. And if Jennifer Francis knows that, and I was saying the same thing 3 months ago, I'm really worried about this summer, end of summer into 2027. And if she's saying the same thing, and I've been saying that, and other people are saying we're having marine heat waves, and there's a collapse of the North Polar ice sheet. It's just a symptom, right? No one lives up there, no one really cares, but it's a symptom of what's happening. So if these things are happening, then the elites know these things are happening. And the elites know these things are happening because 8,000 million people in the human population, 8,000 million, that's a big number, are dependent on fossil fuels for driving, flying, moving goods, moving money, having jobs, and food, and clothing, and shelter, and water, and everything else, and electricity, and medications. And okay, that's the 8,000 million. And so if you want to save yourself, if you're one of the 8 million who runs the planet, and you want to save yourself, and keep the planet habitable for your purposes, 8 million at least, right? Those are the important people. They want to have the planet to live on it. Elon Musk thinks he's going to go to Mars, but I don't know. Maybe he goes to Mars, but he has to have a habitable Earth just to get to Mars. So, we still have all our eggs in one basket here, folks, for now. And so they would like for some things to change. And honestly, the 8 million elites that run the planet for their purposes, it's always for their purposes. We're just allowed to live here, right? They need us to stop. And what do they need us to stop doing? Burning fossil fuels. And we're not going to volunteer to do that. And there is no politician who's going to sign the treaty that says all these people who are not important don't get fossil fuels. There's no politician going to sign that. There's no group of politicians ever going to discuss that. They can't even dare discuss it. And so what's the other way for the 8 million people who run the earth, for their purposes, to survive global heating? War. Blow up the oil fields. Not all of them. most of them. The elites still want their private jets, and that's jet fuel, and that comes from crude oil. They want their electricity, which lots of ways you can get electricity, solar panels, among others, but someone has to manufacture the solar panels, and that takes crude oil to do that, right? So, or they could have natural gas, and like the Cubans, just take the crude oil and burn it directly and generate electricity that way. They'll have some way to come up with the things they need, like manufacturing, generating electricity, transportation of things. And the 8 million will figure that out for themselves. With the rest of us, the other 999 out of 1,000, we have to stop, or their plans don't pay out. They've got all the money, but if they have to go live on Mars because it's too hot on Earth, then that's not what they want. They want to live on Earth. So, does a war in the Middle East and an interruption to the crude oil supply save us? Some of us. The rest of us perish. Now, is that a problem or is that a solution? Because if the real problem is global heating, then one solution to that is cut off the fossil fuels. If that causes a mass fatality event, that's also the solution. Then you can burn all the fossil fuels you want to drive and fly and move your goods and move your money around, all right? Because there's not 8,000 million of us doing that. There's 8 million. Does a war in the Middle East, day 0 in my book, does a war in the Middle East and an interruption of crude oil supply save us from global heating? Some of it. Definitely some of it. We already have global heating right now, folks. Don't kid yourself. We're still on board for hothouse Earth. It could get horrendous. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I introduced some of that in the book. Probably even, if you read the book, it probably even seems a little bit surreal. Like, this can't be right. This is fiction. Obviously, this is fiction. So this guy is just going off the rails with all these events. But if you look at the weather in the last 3-4 months, that's what happens in the book. That actually happens in the book. I didn't make the prediction based on current events. I made the prediction because I'm essentially a climate scientist, and I know what's going to happen to the weather when global heating takes off. I've been doing videos on here for 3-5 years, and I have hundreds, thousands of videos on this topic, and it's always been the same. Too much energy in the system, weather weirding, weather whiplash, and you're not going to survive it. I mean, maybe it won't kill you personally, but it will destroy your economy, it'll destroy your job, it'll destroy your community, it'll destroy your crops, it'll destroy your everything, and then pretty soon you're destroyed because you can't function anymore. That's in the book because I knew that's what would happen. And it's been happening all over the planet for about the last 3 or 4 months, up to a year. It's going to get worse. It does not get better. It never gets better. In 100,000 years, it doesn't get better. It can get worse every year. And every year that it gets worse, it stays that bad for 100,000 years. Nobody understands this. Oh, except there is a group that understands this because they talk to people like me who can tell it to them. Explain it to them. Like explain to children, this is what's going to happen to you. Maybe they watch my videos. How do I know? They hire people like me to come in and consult with their board of directors, with their chamber of commerce, with their everything else. There are people like me who know what's going to happen. I wrote the book. It's right there. $12 in softback, right? Paperback. $12. And you get the same knowledge that I would give to Elon Musk. Not that he needs me to do that. He's a smart enough guy and can figure it out on his own. But I could. And he and I could have that conversation. And he could decide that in order to escape that kind of a calamity, he goes to Mars. Now, of course, he's going to Mars anyway. Maybe he had a conversation with somebody and they said, oh, yeah, you don't want to be in this planet around 2030. You need to be somewhere else. And he was thinking, I could be on Mars. That's where he's headed. Can a collapse of the oil economy save us from global heating? Some of us. The rest of us are so dependent on fossil fuels that we just perish. Or we revert to village life, tilling the soil, managing our animals, defending our village, sharing resources, sharing wisdom. And that could be a really good life for the people who can figure that out. But how many people will figure that out? Oh, about 1 in 1,000. About that. Maybe 2, maybe 3 in 1,000 will figure that out. Now we have, here in my community, we have 1,000 people, 1 million. We have 1,000 people. So we could have 2,000 or 3,000 people who adopt village life. 2,000 or 3,000 people. That's several good-sized villages. If a village is 200 people, it could be as much as 5, but let's say 5. Then 3,000 people who are able to figure out village life, that's 6 good-sized villages, 500 people apiece. That's a good-sized village. You'll have one of everything. Or you have many of everything. You'll have lots of people who can work metal, wood, carpenters, healers, teachers, writers, everything. Herbal healers, everything you can imagine, right? People who work with animals, people who can tan and work with leather, make wheels, barrels, work with wood and everything, make nails. If you had 500 people in a village, you could have everything. And of course, you'd have coders and people like that who don't have a job anymore. But you'll have plumbers and electricians, right? So that's important. You'll still have these features in your community, your village. You could have a really nice village, provided you can find food, water, shelter, clothing, right? You have a lot of work to do. Could you do it in 100 days? Probably not, but you could get started. Oh, you should buy my book. Link in the description. It talks about how you get started. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what the book is about. That's why I say it's optimistic. The book is optimistic. It's not like, oh no, we revert to cannibalism. Now we're eating each other. We're all going to go extinct. This is not about that. Oh, it does have cannibals in it. It has cannibal zombies. The book has cannibal zombies. Spoiler alert. But they're a joke. They're just a joke. They're part of the plot. They're part of the drama, but they end up being a joke. They're a clown act. The cannibal zombies are a clown act. No threat at all. Not really. A threat to themselves. And, okay, I won't spoil it. I like talking about the book because I think the book is clever, but I won't spoil it for you. Buy the book. Find out what happens with the cannibal zombies. Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see if the collapse of the crude oil-based economy is enough to save us from global heating. Can't prove a negative, of course, but it's one of the things it could. If we have a big war in the Middle East and we interrupt the flow of crude oil enough to panic everyone and panic the industrialized nations, panic everyone into hoarding, panic some people who don't have the resources anymore into rioting and confusion and looting and toppling of governments because they don't have crude oil. And what happens if you don't have crude oil? No driving, no flying, no movement of goods, no movement of money, no jobs. There you go. Right there. People are off to the races. If I don't have my things, then I don't have life. And without life, I perish. And therefore, I'm storming the Capitol. Give me my crude oil. And, what kind of world is that? Well, that's a world in which you're not burning fossil fuels. And if you're not burning fossil fuels, you're not enhancing the greenhouse effect. And if you're not enhancing the greenhouse effect, you stop contributing to global heating. And if you're not contributing to global heating, then the planet stops getting hotter. It doesn't cool off, by the way. That's a 1,000-year project right there. But it stops getting worse. Maybe. I mean, not even guaranteed, by the way. I think if we were to have a big enough kerfuffle right now that we seriously shut off the availability access to crude oil for 999 people out of 1,000, right? That only 1 in 1,000 still has access. 999 do not. Yes, it would be a mass fatality event, but I think maybe coin toss odds, we could save ourselves from the worst of global heating. Coin toss odds. Is it worth having a war in the Middle East? Probably not. But guess what, folks? We can't escape the reality that we must stop burning fossil fuels. That's what saves us. And I don't know how we do that. We're not doing it voluntarily. We're not doing it through leadership. We're not doing it through deliberation and an adult discussion. We're not doing it in a way that's going to save as many people as possible and preserve civilization and preserve progress. We're not doing it that way. But we could do it on accident. Or if you're into conspiracies, we could do it on purpose. Yeah. Who knows, right? Who really knows? Bombing Iran. Oh, and then they bombed Saudi Arabia. Oh, no, the horror. Who knows? Russia's not exporting crude oil. Venezuela's down. That left Iran and Saudi Arabia. Oops. Oopsie. Are we going to save ourselves? If this continues, we just might. Most of us will still suffer. Most of us will probably be swept up in a mass fatality event because of no fossil fuels. Read the book. Oh yeah, read the book. I mean, if you don't want to volunteer to be one of the 999 out of 1,000, then read the book. I mean, maybe there's something in there that'll do you some good. I don't know. Read the book, people. I wrote the book so you would read the book. I mean, yeah, I get some royalties from it, but that's not why I wrote the book. I don't need the royalties. I don't expect a lot of royalties. But I'm hoping it does some people some good. Read the book. Day Zero is a really interesting part of the book. Yeah, definitely read that part. And then you got another 100 days of coping. And in the end, I think the book is optimistic. It's not meant to be a downer. It's meant to be encouragement. It's supposed to encourage you. We got to do this. We have to do this. We don't have a choice. We have to do this. We could have done this voluntarily with leadership and decisions and adult discussions and votes and treaties. We could have done it that way, but we didn't. We're not going to. Clearly, we're not going to. So what else can we do? Have a war. Shut down the oil wells. Shut down the oil supply. Have a big dumpster fire. Throw everyone into the deep end of the pool so you can swim. That's another way to do it. And the day after it happens, whether it's done deliberately or done on accident or nature does it to us, the world you're going to wake up in, maybe not the day after, maybe 2 weeks after, but somewhere, the day you're going to wake up into, you're going to find out that there's no driving, there's no flying, there's no movement of goods, food and other things, there's no movement of money, you won't have any, and there's no job, you won't have that either. Now what? But if you have a copy of my book, you can answer that. Yes, you can answer that. Will you be able to pull it off just from that? Maybe. Maybe. It's not hard to figure out. It's just regular people figuring it out in 100 days. And it's hard, and they figure it out. And some people don't. Even if they try, sometimes people don't. But your first shot at figuring it out is trying, right? Again, the link is in the description. And as things proceed here, I will be back here again to level the exact same warning. We're in for it. My next expectation, actually, is colossal heat waves this summer. We're in for it, people. And I'm not the only one saying it, all right? If you don't want to listen to me, don't. But we're in for it now, folks. We're in for it. It only gets worse from here. Maybe on accident it gets worse. Maybe deliberately it gets worse. It doesn't matter. It just gets worse from here. Because that's all I can do. So that's what I got. Got other things to do. I got to finish my basement, right? The eternal project around here. And my recommendation for you, well, like and subscribe. My other recommendation for you is don't die. That's your responsibility. Good luck.